Welcome back to the Transformers, the creation of a billion-dollar brand. I'll say my name because I haven't said it in a long while, Ethan Malvo. Um, in the last episode, we were talking about the development of the Decepticon faction. And as I was saying, there were a lot of things that had to be tweaked, but Bob Budiasky and his team had a lot of insight and a lot of creativity when it came to the development of what the Decepticon arch enemy of the Autobots or the Decepticon faction, the Decepticon enemy robots would be. And of course, they use the Cold War to inform the details of what these arch enemies of the Autobots would have in terms of their modus operandi. And as I was going on about it, Shockwave would be this kind of Trotsky, Khrushchev, bland technocrat leader of the Decepticons, the original leader of the Decepticons. Megatron had this more inspiring story as a former gladiator, and he would lead a coup that would overthrow Shockwave, but would keep Shockwave still in the power, in the proximities of power, because Megatron could not do without having such a technocrat, and Shockwave yielded or acquiesced to this coup. And Soundwave would be Megatron's basic right-hand man, but Starscream was a new character. He did not come over with the original Diaclone toy line. That was something that Bob Budiansky and his team really developed and matured. And as I said before, he wanted the Decepticons to represent, in terms of their story arc, something that parodied or was in proximity to what communism had done. This idea of invasion and leaving devastation in your wake. Of course, America, in its fight against communism, would do a lot of the same things in terms of the Vietnam War. But the Vietnam War, as well as the original war in terms of Afghanistan, the takeover, the Soviet Union's takeover of Afghanistan, that would be the embodiment of the Decepticon plan of action. Excuse me for the pauses, but I've got to think of the right words to really make you understand what Budiansky was really after, because that's very important in terms of the branding and the development of these characters. You have to have characters and storylines and just basic motives that make sense to the reader or the onlooker, because this would soon be and inform what the cartoon series that everybody remembers of Generation 1. And while you can call, and the reason why I say Reagan, you have to understand, Reagan's big thing was, freedom and independence, free market, but the ideas of the contrast between us and the communists would be embodied in the contrast between the Decepticons and the Autobots. And to get back to Starscream Starscream was the embodiment of what Marvel and Budiansky would do, because in the original Diaclone concept, you did not have this dichotomy of the Autobots only being on land and the Decepticons being in the sky, the strategic advantage. But in Budiansky, these things would be more clearly developed. The Decepticons would be better tacticians and strategists of the sky, while the Autobots were better strategists in terms of land and the terrain. And that comes about simply because of the preference that Budiansky gave to the Decepticons for the most planes, on their team. And, out of them, there would be Starscream, there would be these groups of planes, Starscream, and then you would have Sky Warp and Thunder Cracker. Sky Warp, who had the ability to either warp light miles ahead of an enemy target, or warp behind an enemy target and then take the position, take the advantage of the position. Thundercracker, who had this ability to break the sound barrier in the sky, and also had this ability of using flamethrowers in such a way that would annihilate the opponent or whatever it was. But nevertheless, in Starscream, of course, who was this great technician or strategist of the sky, who was the leader of the Decepticon strike force of planes. And indeed, and I'm going to get to the toy line, I have something very special planned when I start talking about the actual toy line. But anyway, the idea that Starscream was the head tactician and the head strategist of these planes whenever they would engage the Autobots. And even though he was not Megatron's right-hand man, he was seen as being this leader in waiting, leader in the wings. And of course, that was a continuing theme in terms of the communist regimes, especially after the death of Joseph Stalin, but the idea that, there was somebody always waiting to backstab you, to take you out, to undercut your authority. And that was the role, as I said before also in the last episode, that Starscream would play in regards to the comic book story arc and development. And just to go back and talk about labeling here, one of the things that Budiansky really wanted was the slogan of more than meets the eye. And let's see if I can get so people can see what I did in the beginning here. And that the factions would have these symbols. This, of course, this symbol, which has had a great comeback, I must say. You see it periodically with grown people. These are not even children, grown people have this tag on their cars, tag on the t-shirt. And Budiansky said, well, since they're factions, let's give them a symbol for their faction. The same way, you have the sickle for the communists, and you have the red, white, and blue, Old Glory for the United States. These factions of robots need symbols that represent their enclave, their sovereignty. And so this was developed by Budiasky. This symbol here for Hasbro, as well as this symbol right here for the Decepticons, if you can see this. And, that way, these people have clear-cut enemies. And they had a great success with all of this in terms of the G.I. Joe franchise, because, everybody remembers the Cobra logo. And all of that, of course, would come from, as I said before, the criminal organization in terms of James Bond Spectre. But again, the idea of the label, the moniker, that will go a long way in the child association with these characters and the investment with these characters. I have always had a preference, of course, for the Decepticon logo, but nevertheless, that kind of perception that the child has to have in order to distinguish who are the enemies, or who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. And Hasbro was very smart to give leeway, though they did not always give a free hand, or they did not always agree with everything that Marvel was doing with the toy line and the brand. But to give them the creative space to come up with these ideas. If Hasbro didn't like it, of course, they would discard it. But, Budiasky constantly made Hasbro see that, you had to have that kind of dichotomy and those kinds of labels. And, of course, the whole more than meets the eye understanding of the way you would market the toy line. And once you marketed the toy line, with these copyrighted slogans, as we said, more than meets the eye. Let's see, more than meets the eye. Robots in disguise. That was great in terms of copywriting. You see, because this would have been just a generic throwaway slogan. Oh, well, it's more than meets the eye. Just talking about a situation. Or he's more than meets the eye. Or she's more than meets the eye. And to take that out and use that, the old folks used to say that all the time. More than meets the eye. But then to get the rhythm of the copywriting correct, robots in disguise. And that is how Marvel began the rudimentary and the fundamentals, so that the cartoon series, which we will talk about in the next episode, could begin.